All right, everyone. Hopefully the audio is working out. Um, Had to do a second video for tonight just to make sure things were working fine. I'm going to give it about 2 minutes, and then I'm going to get started with what I want to talk about with Ukraine. So, I'm sure a number of you guys have just filed in. I can see the numbers stacking up. And you guys can leave any questions or comments or anything you want in the live chat. I always leave the live chat open. So you guys can say anything you want. Also, let me know. It doesn't look like the audio is doing well, but I know it actually is hooked up and everything is how it should be. So, as a recap, um, tonight I am talking about the current uh, war or special military operation in Ukraine and how it actually impacts or what it means to us as Americans that actually care about our Bill of Rights and our Second Amendment. And I do have a lot of, I don't think I've mentioned this before, but I do have quite a bit of European viewership according to the YouTube analytics and data. So you may not be Americans or have a Second Amendment, but you do watch my videos apparently. So at least for all of us that we hold these things near and dear, I felt like after an entire month ongoing of this war that's happening, I felt like we should do a video. So, if you guys can hear me well, I'd like to know just before the video actually kicks off. But I can see and we have more viewers, so I can see that more of you are here. Just let me know. But in the meantime, I'm going to give it about a minute or two, and then we're going to get started. So let's see. Also, if you guys have any thoughts about the war in Ukraine, put them up. Go ahead and comment. I'd like to know what you're thinking, because I have some thoughts about it. And we're about to get into that. But if you guys can hear me, let me know. But yeah, I'll give it another minute or two. We'll get started. Well, I do have to say, at least before I get started, thank you all for liking the video. We already have a number of likes here. And for those of you that I can see that are watching right now, thank you guys for being here. In some ways, not a good time. In other ways, perhaps it was exactly the right time. But leaving that, let's see. Now, I can't pronounce your name. I'm going to try, and it's probably going to be terrible. Cope Stakik. War? What war? It's a clown show. It is. I mean, it's the first thing it is sad. But in terms of logistics, PMCSing equipment, tactics, and actually having the initiative, this is the absolute clown show. And I think you guys know who I'm talking about. But I think I'll go ahead and get started. So the biggest thing That's so. First of all, disclaimers. If someone is jumping into this video and they don't know my channel, they don't know who I am, they don't know my background, they don't know. The first thing that I will say is I am not a strategist. I am not a expert on Russian military doctrine. I'm not an expert on the state affairs of Ukraine, the geopolitical, economic, and other um, reasons behind this. I'm not an expert in any of that. I'm just a boy, Mr. Second Amendment. I do have a bachelor's of a history degree, and I did fight in Afghanistan and Iraq as an infantryman, dismounted reconnaissance scout. So I do have a little bit of a grasp of living almost 2 years of my life in combat zones and doing the thing in terms of being a grunt on the ground and having a little bit of context for understanding how we got here, or trying to. But no, I'm not an expert in these matters. But that's my full disclaimer. Uh, but just commenting. And at least, like I said just before, that I do have a pretty surprisingly decent amount of my audience in Europe. But at least for you Americans watching, it's pretty interesting that they, at least what we're watching, that we have, and I'll just get right to the point, that we have everyday, regular civilians that were teachers and doctors, lawyers, shopkeepers, everyday average people. Didn't serve in the military, didn't have any military experience. And since February 24th, the beginning of this special military operation, this war, because for the fact that, at least from the Russian / Putin perspective, that this is not a war. I can tell you, having been to war, it looks like a war. But getting back on target, the fact that everyday average people, these are people who didn't own guns, most of them. They weren't professional soldiers. But when their country became invaded from the Russian Federation, they volunteered to just grab a gun and do the best they could. Or if they had skills or talent, if they're a EMS personnel, nurse or something, they're helping deal with wounded civilians and everything else. But there is a large part of people who did not want violence, war, or bloodshed. They don't know what that world, living in that world, looks like. But they knew that their country was being invaded, and they knew they had to do something, so they are doing it right now. That's pretty impressive, at least to me. But I do welcome your guys' questions or any comments you guys have. But the biggest thing, or the biggest theme that I have for tonight is, I don't like, and I hope you're the same. I don't like to see this. I don't like to see displaced millions, literally millions of civilians. In this case, women and children, um, being displaced from their hometowns and where they grew up. I don't like to see war in general. Um, I regard it as the absolute breakdown of human interaction. I do. And the fact that this is happening, um, yeah, I don't. I wish it could be a different way, and I don't like to see it. But I do have to say that I am impressed with the Ukrainians, and I am impressed with their resolve to defend their townships, their villages, their cities, their home against this special military operation, this war, this invasion. I'm impressed. And I think most people, at least most of my fellow Americans, probably giving no benefit to any doubt. I think most of my fellow Americans could probably not find Ukraine on a map. But now that we can, now that we understand their resolve, I'm impressed. Still sad to me. I don't want to see it. But facing, seems like they're doing the right thing. Which reminds me, for most of you that are watching now, you can see the numbers, but probably watch this later. Most of you are probably Americans. And we have quite a rich history of this, don't we? But not everyone else does. And they have parts of their history we don't have. But at least as Americans, we have a very distinct history of average, everyday civilians picking up their own guns and voting. 1991, at least with as Americans, some of you may be Ukrainians. I know my Lithuanian buddy is going to share this with his buddies in Ukraine. So at least from the American perspective, that since the late 18th century, we, and I say collectively, we as Americans know and understand the usefulness, I would argue, and I will argue, the necessity for armed civilians and armed citizenry, an armed populace. Because despite whatever happens in the polls or politics, or in this case for Ukraine, a invasion from a foreign military that they do not want in their country, that the armed citizen always has a vote. Always. And for me and the other Americans watching, that was our founding fathers with flintlock muskets for the Ukrainian people. Ukrainian military, but also the Ukrainian people. That means AKs, javelins, stingers, Panzerfaust 44s, AT4s, things like that, MLAWs. Very effective anti-tank weapons. So that was the biggest point that I wanted to lead with, was that we have a country that is literally fighting to defend their own villages. And as Americans, at least, we can understand that. At least we have a grasp on that. And as Americans, or anyone, you can read our Declaration of Independence. Yeah, you can see that. Technology has changed, but the sentiment has not. and Ukrainian people are unfortunately having to live that out. Let's see. We just had some stuff from Mario. Good evening. How is this any different than the 1990? Give me glasses. Sorry, everyone. How is this any different than the 1990 invasion of Iraq on Kuwait? Yeah. We have a very weak president, and NATO is a joke. Yeah, that makes me think a little bit. So, for those of you, some of you probably were not born at that time, but Saddam Hussein, controlling Iraq, invaded Kuwait, and we had an international coalition, not just NATO. And in fact, well, I mean, being a history nerd, how far do you want to go? But the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia agreed to house our United States military troops and assets in the terrain and in their territory to rid Saddam Hussein from Kuwait, a sovereign state, or at least an American vernacular, we would call that a nation, but state, internationally speaking. This is it's a little bit different because, let's see, prior to the Persian Empire, I don't think Kuwait ever belonged to at least the 1990 version of Iraq, or at least Saddam's Iraq. So this was a country trying to do its own thing, and there was politics involved, as always. I think the difference here would be probably two things. First of all, Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union, which did collapse in the early 90s. But this is a land and a people that used to be under the Iron Curtain, used to be part of the Soviet Union. And I don't think Kuwait was. Certainly not under Saddam's Iraq. Secondly, and probably more reasonably severe, is Saddam was not a nuclear power. And, doing the Battle of, was it 48 Easting with the tanks and everything and liberating Kuwait, not the same when you have a country that's doing this and they have nuclear weapons. And in fact, Russia actually has the most, at least numerically, quantifiably speaking, the most nuclear weapons of any country on earth, including us, the United States. So I think the fact that Ukraine used to be part of the Soviet Union, and if you know anything about Putin, that's kind of a big deal. And the second thing is all sides here, minus Ukraine, have nuclear weapons. Changes things. So I think it's actually wildly different than it was in the Gulf War, Part 1. The next thing, NATO is a joke. I'm here to tell you that it's actually not. And especially in the face of everything that has happened in the last month, NATO is, even if you thought NATO was a joke before, which is a wild miscalculation, NATO is not a joke anymore. The European Union, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, United States, Canada, and a bunch of European allies, somehow Turkey, and a bunch of countries. They're basically Article 5 is probably the biggest part of discussion there for NATO. But this countries that have decided to be allies, chiefly because of the Soviet Union back in the Cold War days, which seem to be coming back in a way. But NATO is not a joke, not anymore. I mean, I personally never thought it was, but especially now. Oh. All right, let's see. What else have we got? Lithuania just pulled a Switzerland. All able-bodied individuals are allowed to keep their arms after compulsory service. From Purple People Eater. Yeah, my buddy from college, we had this exchange program that we would send our cadets, and then they would send their cadets from their version of West Point to study abroad in the United States with us. And yeah, it was very enlightening for both parties. But at least my friend, sample size of one, he's a captain in the Lithuanian army, infantry captain. So he's going at it from that perspective in the talks that we've had recently, especially. But I did not know that. If they get to keep their weapons, I think that's a good thing. To add to Mario, I remember when Dad was shipped to Iraq in the 90s. The fear of my old man getting killed by nerve gas messed my mom up. Dad being Army. EOD, explosiveness disposal. I can imagine so. Yeah. In at least 2017 to 2018, ISIS Iraq, we had what we called Jay's List, which was like a modern, I guess, version of Mop Gear, and we did have a couple mustard gas attacks down the road, a couple of kilometers, and we had SOPs for, at least for us at that time, in this little town called Haditha. That if anything was to happen, jump in the Euphrates River and decontaminate yourself. I was like, wow, this is wildly disconcerting. But chemical and biological weapons, very concerning. Whether you are the guy on the ground who may be exposed to it, or if your family members from deployed or serving members in your family who might be exposed to that. And it's a different circle of a fresh hell that thankfully I just watched from the distance, but never actually got exposed to. But yeah, that is kind of a big deal. MSA says, I'm in Korea. I'm in Ukraine now. Well, MSA, I don't know if, and I would urge you not to say what city or what region or part of Ukraine that you're in. But at least the only thing I'll ask is, what are you doing? And how is it going? But, back to the point of the whole live stream, trying to stay on target is, we have average everyday Ukrainians that are picking up arms. We have Ukrainian civilians that wanted nothing to do with guns or war, and now they have guns and war. Massive amounts of death. We have, and this is at least from the American perspective, this is the most interesting because I've noticed the politicians and the people who in years past have most ardently argued for restricting weaponry, at least on the American side, um, talking about assault weapons bans and gun control. And these are the exact same people now that are supporting Ukraine. And in fact, um, some of you have maybe noticed, but I've had a number of my videos taken down. And at least if you have a gun related YouTube channel, we've all noticed that the revenue has gone down. We've noticed shadow banning. We've noticed certain videos taken down. And at least in my sample size of one experience, I've had 3 videos taken down of me shooting or teaching people how to use AR-15s or building an AR-15 on a workbench. These videos were taken down by YouTube, and they have an ever-changing list of community standards and guidelines and rules and things. And let's just say, to sum it up, YouTube has not really been very friendly to, well, now we're seeing First Amendment stuff, but YouTube has not really been friendly to Second Amendment related channels and videos. So for the fact that I had a number of videos taken down, and for a fact that I've had my own channel threatened multiple times, and for the fact that YouTube and the other tech companies or politicians in the United States, there's so many of them that are against guns. It blew my mind. It was about 4 days ago. And I was trying to watch some YouTube video and I saw an ad. And it was an ad from the Ukrainian government asking for foreign volunteers for their Foreign Legion to fight, kill, and die with, yes, actual assault weapons. And it just kind of blew my mind. It's like, wow, you guys don't want everyday people to see videos with AR-15s or AKs and things like that. I'm taking down some of my videos. Any gun channel on YouTube is, shadow banned or all these other things. You clearly don't like us. We know that. And then the turnaround and have advertisements for the government to have people join the fight. And it's not just the big tech companies. It's not just Google, YouTube. But all these people that I saw previously, at least, again, from an American perspective, talking about banning guns, assault weapons bans, gun control, all of this. And then the Ukrainian war happens, and you have a shopkeeper or a Ukrainian mother or some other average, everyday, regular citizen going to the police station to pick up an AK-47 or 74, AK-12, whatever, from the Ukrainian government, average, everyday people with actual what our Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms would definitely identify as a machine gun. Something's wrong. something's off here. And I think it's leading into the next point, which I wanted to make sure I said, which is that how the media, different sources, are reporting on this. Very strange. Well, if you're used to war, it's really not. It's just strange for me to see people or organizations or media outlets that were all about banning guns, and now they're showing, Ukrainian civilians picking up AKs and javelin missiles and shoulder fire munitions to defend their country. And they're propping that up as a good thing, where previously they were not about it. Yeah, kind of weird. But the biggest point, I've already said the 2 points that I really wanted to bring on tonight, but average, everyday civilians with weapons, carbines and rifles, yeah, kind of makes a difference. It definitely in this conflict, yeah. So that's all I wanted to really say is, the reason for the Second Amendment, at least as Americans in our country, our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, Amendment number 2, going back to 1791, in our Constitution. The reason for it, if you've ever wondered about AKs or AR-15s or free populists, free men having weapons, if you've ever wondered why does that exist? Why back in the 18th century, why was this so important to the founders of at least our country? Well, you're seeing it. You're seeing it all over the news, and you're seeing it all over your news feeds, and you're seeing it all over social media with average, everyday Ukrainian civilians with weapons. That's why. Because unfortunately, speaking from experience, you can have all the tanks, guided missiles, drones, Apache attack helicopters, A-10s. You can have all of this military hardware, but at the end of the day, some random regular people with AKs, it'll keep you busy. It'll keep you busy. At least for us, it's busy in Afghanistan for quite some time. 2 decades. Who's counting? I guess. But the best protection against internal or external aggression is an armed populace. And that's the whole point of this video. And I'll end by saying I'm not a fan of this special military operation from Putin's perspective or the Russian perspective. Not a fan of this. Not a fan to see civilian targets, civilian casualties, collateral damage. I don't want to see any of this. But the average everyday civilian with an AK or javelin or something else, yeah, we're all seeing it now. So I don't think there's any of you watching now that are against guns or part of the, at least in the American political perspective, anti-gun. But if there's anyone that's against our Bill of Rights and against firearms among a free populace and free citizens, I would say that the reason for this, it's not gun shows, it's not the show off, it's not any of the stuff that you think is real. It's you're seeing it right now, and you've been seeing it every day for over a month now. So I'll end it now by saying that I think we all need to watch, pay attention, and a little bit of concern there for sure. But I do believe that people, well, I have to believe, people who just want to go about their lives in peace, and they are threatened and invaded, and violence is happening all around them, and their family is getting killed, they are going to fight. That's all I have to say. So, thank you guys for watching or being part of this. But the last thing I'll end it with is the reason for, at least in the United States, our version of the Second Amendment and why this is so important to us, at least as Americans who care about it. The rest of everyone else who's watching that and watching the war in Ukraine and everything else, you're seeing this every day. And you're seeing why this is important, and you're seeing why, at least you may not understand it, but at least you're seeing why it's important to us. So I'll end it here. But thank you guys for tuning in. Comment for questions. Be around.